Testing, 1, 2, 3, testing.
Because the former troubles are forgotten, because they are hid from mine eye. For behold, I create a new heaven and earth, and the former shall not be remembered, nor come to mind. But be ye glad and rejoice forever in that which I create. For behold, I create Jerusalem, a rejoicing, and a people of joy.
All right, good morning. Welcome to Line by Line Bible Studies. We're continuing the book of Isaiah. It's on the screen there. There we go. All right, continuing the book of Isaiah, chapter 65. And let's read through it. I am sought of them that asked not for me. I am found of them that sought me not. I said, behold me, unto a nation that was not called by my name. I have spread out my hands all the day unto a rebellious people, which walketh in a way that was not good, after their own thoughts. A people that provoketh me to anger continually to my face, that sacrificeth in gardens, and burneth incense upon altars of brick, which remain among the graves in lodge and the monuments, which eat swine's flesh, and broth of abominable things is in their vessels, which say, stand by thyself, come not near to me, for I am holier than thou. These are a smoke in my nose, a fire that burneth all the day. Behold, it is written before me, I will not keep silence, but will recompense, even recompense into their bosom, your iniquities, and the iniquities of your fathers together, saith the Lord, which have burned incense upon the mountains, and blasphemed me upon the hills. Therefore will I measure their former work into their bosom. Thus saith the Lord. Thus saith the Lord, as the new wine is found in the cluster, and one saith, destroy it not, for a blessing is in it, so will I do for my servant's sake, that I may not destroy them all. You can see there, I deleted the plural, but that's not to say that that's the way it should be. I'm just going to leave it the way it is. As far as, we're not coming back here anyway, so we may tomorrow, that's true. And I will bring forth a seed out of Jacob, and out of Judah an inheritor of my mountains. And mine elect shall inherit it, and my servants shall dwell there. And Sharon shall be a fold of flocks. In the valley of Achor, a place for the herds to lie down in, for my people that have sought me. But ye are they that forsake the Lord, that forget my holy mountain, that prepare a table for that troop, and furnish the drink offering unto that number. Therefore will I number you to the sword, and ye shall all bow down to the slaughter, as you bow down to those idols. Because when I called, ye did not answer. When I spake, ye did not hear, but did evil before mine eyes, and did choose that wherein I delighted not. Therefore, thus saith the Lord God, behold, my servants shall eat, but ye shall be hungry. Behold, my servants shall drink, but ye shall be thirsty. Behold, my servants shall rejoice, but ye shall be ashamed. Behold, my servants shall sing for joy of heart. But ye shall cry for sorrow of heart, and shall howl for vexation of spirit. And ye shall leave your name for a curse unto my chosen. For the Lord God shall slay thee, and call his servants by another name. That he who blesseth himself in the earth shall bless himself in the God of truth. And he that sweareth in the earth shall swear by the God of truth, because the former troubles are forgotten, and because they are hid from mine eyes. For behold, I create new heavens and a new earth, and the former shall not be remembered nor come to mind. But be ye glad and rejoice forever in that which I create. For behold, I create Jerusalem, a rejoicing, and her people, a joy. And I will rejoice in Jerusalem, and joy in my people. And the voice of weeping shall be no more heard in her, nor the voice of crying. There shall be no more thence an infant of days, nor an old man that hath not filled his days. For the child shall die 100 years old, but the sinner being 100 years old shall be accursed. And they shall build houses, and shall inhabit them. And they shall plant vineyards, and eat the fruit of them. They shall not build, and another inhabit. They shall not plant, and another eat. For as the days of a tree are the days of my people, and mine elect shall long enjoy the work of their hands. They shall not labor in vain, nor bring forth for trouble. For they are the seed of the blessed of the Lord, and their offspring with them. And it shall come to pass, that before they call I will answer, and while they are yet speaking I will hear. The wolf and the lamb shall feed together, and the lion shall eat straw like the bullock, and dust shall be the serpent's meat. They shall not hurt nor destroy in all my holy mountain, saith the Lord. My voice is still tired from Christmas. A lot of singing on Christmas. And the day before and the day after. All right. So, a thought that jumped immediately to mind. Well, there were lots of thoughts that jumped to mind on the way, along the way. But at the end, these blessings, I was talking about how, there's one way to look at it like, okay, well, there's a couple of natural problems with like a millennial view, a premillennial view. Because as I look at that, I'm like, okay, if I'm going to say, okay, that's people who survive the tribulation into the millennium, and it's not the eternal state, but that's sort of like a parenthesis. So it's hard to really differentiate, right? I mean, it's hard to make that distinction in this passage at all. I mean, in Revelation, I always take it as a revelation in Revelation when it says, the rest of the dead live not again for 1,000 years till the 1,000 years, live not again till the 1,000 years be finished, till the 1,000 years were finished. This is the first resurrection. And the first resurrection, well, but the fact that it inserts that 1,000-year period, which some people say is purely symbolic. And then you could say, well, these long lifespans are also symbolic of eternal life. Kind of like, and I was thinking also when he said, for silver I will bring gold, for brass, silver. It's, like that upgrade. So for a long life, how about eternal? But then I was thinking about how it describes the blessings of heaven in earthly terms. And you notice, unlike the way, there's no like, they shall feast endlessly at tables of plenty that they do not work for. You know what I mean? Like, because that's how people present heaven, like this big banquet. And there is a feast put on, symbolically, the Lord puts on this feast. It's called the marriage supper of the Lamb. But they extrapolate from that the everlasting existence, that the whole thing is just a big supper, right? It's just a big dinner, never, forever and ever. But the indication of Scripture in the Old Testament is that, of they will work, but they're not going to labor in vain or bring forth for trouble. Because that's the most frustrating thing about the world, is that you work, and someone comes along and steals what you worked for. You work, someone comes along, and then something happens and it gets destroyed. There's a fire, flood, natural disaster, a locust swarm, whatever. It comes through and devours that thing which you were working on. And sometimes it could be the wrath of God or a punishment, or it might just be that's how it is. So that God might be glorified, so that you could bear it. By bearing it, as Job bore his afflictions, we would give glory to God. Because there is some purpose in our sufferings, if only that. And there are other purposes too. Sometimes we suffer it for our own good. There are all kinds of reasons we might suffer. But we can at least suffer for the Lord's sake and for his glory. And we glorify him by taking the suffering with patience, And, I wish I gave God more glory like that myself personally. I'm not saying that I'm an expert in handling the suffering. I just know that that's what one ought to do. You know what I mean? And that's the beginning. Here's the thing. Like to say, now you know, and knowing is half the battle. It's not untrue. If you don't know what you're doing. You're blind. You're groping about in the darkness. You don't have any idea at all what you're supposed to do. But then having some knowledge, at least you know what you're supposed to do. It's not always so easy to do it, especially when things become more contrary to your nature or complicated even. Or just like in regular life. You can tell someone how to drive a car, but unless they get some practice in, they're not going to know what they're doing. They're not going to be any good at it. They need to practice. And also the righteousness needs to be practiced. Christianity needs to be practiced. It's something you do. So those are some thoughts about the millennial aspects of what's being said here. And so we left off, we talked about the troop and the number, the supposed gods that represent those things. But here's the thing, the what their name is indicates kind of what they represent. And troop is interesting that it's troop because it was fortune. It makes me think soldiers of fortune. In that sense, and maybe the word troop as a gathering together of, as an assemblage, but also the fact that in order to take one's fortune often in the world required, especially in ancient times, to band together in a troop and go and rob and murder. I don't know. That's certainly how Belteshazzar acquired his wealth. He inherited it from his forebears who did exactly that. Pillage and rape and murder and all that stuff to get the wealth of other nations. Hold on. I really wish in my earlier studies I'd been a little more mindful of the mute button. For that, I apologize. All right. So, it wasn't laziness. It was just not aware. Not really thinking. It's funny like that. Someone in radio, I'm sure they would know all about the cough. They probably call it the cough button or something like that, But it's far away from everything else. The big screen. All right. Should be probably a touch screen or something. That would be easier. All right. So we're picking up at verse 13. And overall, he's talking again to Israel, but he's differentiating between his servants and those who are not his servants. And he sort of has had this attitude throughout the prophets that people, just as, you think about it, just as Esau was the son of Isaac, 100% as much as 100% as much as Jacob was, they were both equally his son. But because of the reasons that the scripture gives, which, the scripture, the reason God gives is before they were born, while they were yet in the womb, neither having done any good or evil, it was said, the elder shall serve the younger. Jacob have I loved, Esau have I hated. He didn't say that at the time, but that's what the scriptures later indicate. And he went on and lived out when God said he hated him, when he lived his life, you could see how hateful he was. Right? And so we also can well, not we per se, but in the church or in Israel, in any case, there are those who are just there because they're there, because they were born into it. And there's a problem. They're like, oh, like, kid, you see these people all the time. I hear them on the radio. Oh, I was raised Christian, but now I don't believe in that BS. And there's plenty of people like that. They all have very they all have very unique stories. No, they're all the same. That's the funny part. So I went to college and I smoked weed, and then some people talked to me about the stars and stuff or something. I don't know. And then I realized God wasn't real, man. Something like that. And I do think that sometimes parental repression of children with religion is a huge mistake that parents make. They repress too much they repress anything worldly in the child. I mean, they try to them externally tamp it down, and they hold it down. Then as soon as you remove that pressure, when they go away from you in high school, after high school, when they're out of your control, they're an adult and they're in a different location. Many times, all that repression, boom, instantly explodes into this. The world is such a world of wonder and amazement. That's why I was careful, because I was raising sons. And I didn't want them to be sexually immoral, but because I had been a struggle of my own youth and stuff. I was careful, though, not to. Well, I didn't expose them to pornography. I wouldn't allow such a thing, unlike what happened to me as a child. But I didn't allow them to be exposed to sexually explicit material or pornography. But I certainly, which to me is the same thing. If you understood what pornos means and sexually explicit, whatever. Because I mean, originally it was, they weren't allowed to make obscene things, right? And then there was a Supreme Court that suddenly, like, everything became art, even if it was obviously obscene. Because it used to be kind of illegal to produce those things, obscenity in that regard, or print it. But we've changed, and I don't know, my opinion is, I don't know if the state should be legalizing or making it illegal. It still existed. It was just more busyness for people to go about arresting people and getting, fining. And I'm not a big fan of all that. But parents need to police their children on some degree. So I protect them from pornography because it exists. But I didn't want to repress from them seeing the beauty of the female too much. I didn't want to try to intentionally expose them, but it's like, that there's some degree to which, it's natural for boys to be attracted to the opposite sex, and women are always trying to be attractive in many cases, especially when they are attractive already. Unfortunately, the attraction has this quality in people. Often when they know they're attractive, they try to maximize it, and when they're not, they don't bother. Sometimes. Not that that's correct. Everyone should try to maintain fitness, which is always very attractive to everyone. That we should be somehow fit, and we shouldn't become slovenly and not take care of ourselves to some degree. I mean, that's a truth, I believe. I washed my hair this morning. I don't try to come out here all, I comb my hair before I come into the thing. I put on a clean shirt, or one that I think is clean, even if I'm not putting a suit on. There is some degree to which we ought. I'm not one of those people who's like, oh, I'll never wear a tie or anything per se, even though I don't regularly. I do put the tie on, as many people have seen. All right. So into the verses. My servants shall eat, and ye shall be hungry. My servants shall drink, but ye shall be thirsty. It's the delineation between those who serve God and those who serve him not. Those who choose what he delights in, and those who do not choose what he delights in, right? Those who answer when he calls, and those who do not answer when he is called. Those who do evil in his eyes. Even if you don't think God is watching you, he is. He sees. He knows everything that happens in existence is just known of God. Don't think of him as a human. We think in terms of our limited abilities. And, they talk about how small we are, how insignificant and small, tiny, 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 tiny. It's like, yeah. So the universe really isn't that big. I mean, that's almost what you might as well say. I mean, just because you can look at smaller, 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 why not bigger, bigger, bigger? Are there not things that are immense? And the most immense thing of all is God, most magnificent. And we stand before him constantly. He is calling, from their voice went out into the world. God is called. There is the call, and we can pay attention to it. Whether we hear the gospel. The people who don't hear the gospel also don't. They hear the righteous call of God in their conscience. And when the gospel is preached, they will hear it. It also makes you think of, all right, this could be like, hey, it is much the reversal of fortunes that you see in the end when Christ appears, right? When Christ appears, there's a feast prepared, and we eat, and they find themselves left out of this feast. We enter in, we sup with him, and he with us. We enter into that feast. We enter into the wedding, metaphorically, symbolically. We enter into the wedding. The door is shut, and they find themselves excluded. This is something, Jesus talked about, the wailing and gnashing of teeth. It is coming. There's going to be those who are shut out. Those who are ashamed. And he says, of those of the synagogue of Satan, I will cause them to worship before your feet and to know that I have loved you. My servants shall sing, you shall cry and howl, and you will leave your name for a curse unto my chosen, for the Lord God shall slay thee and call servants by another name. I don't know, man. All right, we're going to explore that. All right? Here's the thing. I don't know. The name Israel, that name is a nation in the Middle East. It isn't a curse, though. I'm just exploring the possibilities. Because who's he talking to? What name? What name? The name of those who... Sorry. I'm sort of getting better, and I'm having more of a cough. I was sicker last week. This week I feel better, but my cough has become kind of dried out today. There's people, they're provoking him to anger. They're doing all these things. They're supposed to be my people, but they're not called by my name. I know it's interesting because, there's a way in which I could say, Jew is almost a bad word. For some, I don't think it is, but but in a sense, a comedian remarked that just the way you say it can turn it from, it can be just the normal word for them, or it can be like a slur. That dirty Jew, but the same thing if you say dirty white person, I guess. Right? I don't know. I have to explore that because it's like, that comes to mind. I'm like, okay, but the thing is, the people who were cast off were not called Jews. And they had been Israel. And the Jews returned. But then again, the Lord does call his servants by another name. He calls him by the name of his Son, Christ. You know, Jesus said he came to bear record of the truth. I am the way, the truth, and the light. Or life, sorry. I forgot again. I looked it up and I remembered now. He's both, though. It's true. Both are true. I think it's actually life there because I remember way, truth, and life. But it would not be wrong to say light. He's the light that lighteth every man that entered into the world. I mean, what light you have is the light of God. It doesn't necessarily mean that every man has God, but the light that is given us is of God and is a blessing of God. The degree to which we are able to see the light that is given us, that is what we are judged by. And, and in that we will all be condemned, of course, because we don't live up to our own standards, much less God's. So verse 15, I don't know. He doesn't, but like I said, Israel is the name of a country in the Middle East. Even the Jews don't call themselves by Israel. You know what I mean? The Jews call themselves Jews. We don't use the name Israel for a curse. But, for the Arabs of the region, they probably do curse it, but they're not God's chosen either per se. They're Muslims. I mean, God can choose them. God is choosing thousands of them all the time as they convert to Christianity. There's always a conversion going on. That's the funny thing is that I saw videos that were like, oh, all these Muslims are converting. But as far as I can tell, it's not really unusual. There's always a lot of people in the world, and they make a lot of decisions, and they go different directions. And sometimes someone tells you thousands and thousands. It's nothing. Just like with coronavirus, hundreds of thousands of people dying with that disease, having it at least. Maybe not from it. Some die from it, no doubt. But oddly, though, I don't really think anybody without a comorbidity does, do they? Like, does anyone ever just die from that and nothing else? I mean, because, the truth is, who dies from any one thing, really? Maybe cancer, but like, let's say if you die from a heart attack, you could say, well, the heart attack was the thing that killed you. But was it that, or was it the fact that you never exercised for 40 years and ate terrible? That could be just as much a cause. But we don't do that normally. We just say the last thing. So is it really unreasonable to say COVID killed all these people? Yeah, they were on their last legs, but do you want that to be the way people look at you when you're on your last legs? Like, oh, well, it didn't matter very much. He was on his last legs. No, of course not. But even so, hundreds of thousands, even if you dispute that number, let's not dispute it. Let's just say, okay, yeah, hundreds of thousands, or, it is not in the pool of hundreds of millions is a very small number. And like I said, considering the fact, how often has your life been interrupted by excess funerals? How often have you found that there was a waiting list for someone who died to be buried because there's not enough? All the funerals I attended were pretty close to the time of death. It has not been a plague. Just simply hasn't been. And people are just living in this sort of hypnotized existence where they believe in it because they're told it's an emergency. But it never was. Never was the emergency they made it out to be. People forget the original claims they made to panic us all into this new world, which is forming. Here's the thing. People think, oh, it'll go back to normal. No, it's going to go on to be abnormal unless we fight it. I'm just waiting for people to wake up. I figure in America we will wake up because we're too used to freedom. And there are too many people who are kind of going along with it, hoping that I hope will eventually open their eyes. How many years do you have to go on doing this before you realize, hey, you know what? I don't think they're going to stop ever. They're going to keep telling us how many coronavirus cases there are until we tell them to shut the F up about the coronavirus. And they're going to keep, don't get tested. Do not get tested unless you have symptoms, or if you feel worried, if you're like, oh, I'm sick, I want to know if that maybe, I don't know, even then I would just like, take your and if you're unhealthy at risk, yeah, go take care of yourself. You know what I mean? And unhealthy, that might just mean you're older and you're not in great health. But when I'm talking about kids and stuff, man, skip it. You know, at school, they make them take tests for everything. It's like, they should be ignoring it. Especially at this point, it's over. You know, every pandemic would have like a first few things, and then it would just peter out. They don't go on for years. Pandemics don't last for years, not naturally. It's only because the politicians are, the thing that's limping along on life support. Oh, it's still scary. Come on. It's still scary. Ooh. Ooh. That's how I feel. So I feel like the world we're living in. I honestly am so sick of it. So sick of it. Anyways, Israel. So I don't know exactly how to, I could see some ways. But it's like I said, whatever, God does not call his servants by the name. He doesn't call his servants Israel. And Israel was the nation that God cast off. And those who were part of Judah became the returning remnant. And they became known as the Jews ever after. But then when Christ came, though, the Jews as a nation rejected Christ. And though many of them as individuals served God and did as the nation itself, and God calls his servants by another name. That's how you Christians, you think, that's what God's servants are called by. I don't know what God calls his servants, what name. People always get weird about, what am I? I'm a this, I'm a that, I'm a believer, I'm a disciple, I'm a this, Don't obsess with your label. Worry about what you're doing, as opposed to what sign you pass on your head. Because I would like to, personally myself would be like, I'd like to finish myself and then put out a sign at the end saying, hey, guess what I was? Bam, there you go, and examine my life. Now, not that I want to keep it a secret, obviously, but my point is, don't sound a trumpet before you when you do your alms. You don't want to put your light under a bushel, but on the other hand, don't be too anxious to sound off about how special you are, especially. I mean, what you're sounding a trumpet about, again, about how, let me tell you about my virtues, why I'm a better believer, why I'm holier than thou. I don't call myself a Christian because blah-bitty, blue-bitty, blah. That's what the enemies call them. I don't call myself a Baptist because blah-bitty, blah, blah, or whatever, or I call myself a Lutheran because blah-bitty, blue, Luther. I call myself Catholic because we're the oldest church and blah, 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 blah. Bless yourself. Don't bless yourself with a label. Bless yourself in the God of truth. God of what's actually true. The great truth, the real reality. Swear by the God of truth. If you're going to swear, they will bless. Those are the things often they invoke God's name in blessing and in taking oaths. Jesus said don't swear at all, but his point was about what? Tell the truth. Let your yea be yea, your nay be nay. A lot of times people swear to cover up their lies. It's like, oh, did you steal the cookie? No. Do you swear to God? I swear to God. And it's supposed to convince people. But all it does is invite sin. That's why Jesus spoke against oath-taking. He was saying, just tell the truth. Let your yea be yea and nay be nay. It doesn't mean you can't take an oath. Well, some people don't. Some people believe that, and that's fine. If you feel that you therefore cannot take an oath, then fine. I have no problem with that. I just say that it's more of a thought that you put in and tell the truth. If you do take an oath, you better tell the truth because you've invoked God. You brought God. We're saying don't bring God into the picture and make your sin the more heinous. If I tell a lie, it's bad enough. But I tell a lie and I've invoked the name of God. I've lied by the name of God. I tell you this is the truth. And I knew I was lying. It makes my sin worse. Not that it really, lying in and of itself is bad enough. Swearing falsely on top of it. You makes you appear pious. Oh yes, I swear to God, but in the end, just like slinging out your shingle. Oh, I'm a super Christian. I'm a super Christian. I'm the super Christian. And then people look at me and they say, "You're not a very super Christian. You're kind of a mediocre, maybe piss poor Christian. How about that?" And so my sign becomes disreputable because of me, meaning the shingle I'm hanging out, the name I'm this, I'm that. This is what it means. I'm a Christian. Let me show you the Christian man, and that's my brand. And then I go out and demonstrate what a fool I am. We want to associate ourselves with the Lord. We want to be the servants of God. We want to sit, I sit here and I want to be someone who speaks to you the truth. Right? And the only way to do so is to bow before the God of truth. Truth is something people manipulate all the time because they think it's something that exists in your mind. There is no real truth to some people. There's only what people think. Because in some ways, the collective thoughts of people form a reality unto themselves. Meaning, if a bunch of people believe, oh, the coronavirus is this horrible danger and it's this ongoing pandemic, and the Omicron variant is this highly infectious, even more scary. It's scarier. It's not more dangerous. No one's going to tell you that because nobody knows. But we know it's not. I suspected from the moment I heard about it, it's going to be even less deadly. Why? Because that's what's supposed to happen. They told us. I was told this the first year, the first few months. They're like, because I remember watching. I forgot the guy's name, but he was talking. It was a serious scientist talking about the vaccines and the virus, and the hazards of deploying a vaccine in the midst of a raging pandemic and what it would do to the virus and also what it would mean about the vaccine. And that's why we have such an extremely ineffective vaccine. It's spreading. It doesn't stop the spread. It almost gives you like the same effect as if you had natural immunity, meaning you have a more robust defense against the disease. You still catch the cold, but you don't necessarily get all sneezy. I'm just saying that, not that generally speaking, because I know that's not one of your symptoms for COVID per se. Sneezing is not. I didn't sneeze much, as I recall. I coughed a lot. This is not COVID. It's just a seasonal cold. Former troubles are forgotten because they are hid from my eyes. The reason we can bless ourselves and swear by God, and that we could serve God at all, because he's talking about his servants. Because God has forgotten the former troubles. Because like I said, there are ways in which it's impossible to extract ourselves from the sinful world that we were born into. Meaning of myself, of myself and by my own power and my own ability, I cannot, because, I'm born into it before I have any ability to protect myself from it. I can't shield myself. Parents maybe can try. And a lot of parents do try to shield their children. But like I said, there's a hazard. If you shield them too much, they become like hothouse flowers. As soon as they go out into the sun, they wilt. It's like the cliche, like I was talking about the women thing, right? With you can't like never let them see a woman, and especially not in her done up to be attractive intentionally. Whether you agree with that or not, you don't want them the first time they ever see it to be like that cartoon where the what is it? It's the dog or something, Droopy or something. He goes to the city and he sees the beautiful girl for the first time, and his jaw drops to the floor and his tongue rolls out, and he can't hardly know what to do with himself. He'd never seen a woman before, and you don't want that either. In anything, they've never seen a movie, but we've never seen a video game, never seen this, that. They're going to have to go out into the world at some point and face temptation. And all those things I mentioned are potential hazards. People waste their lives away playing too much video games. People waste their lives away indulging in sexual fantasies. There are ways in which those things swallow people up, and they're hazards, but also in completely keeping them away from any such thing. I'm saying, you keep them away from pornography, but when I was a kid, I remember we used to look at the swimsuit magazines or the lingerie catalogs, and I'm not saying you provide them with that either, because that's also sexualized. But on some level, like I told my wife early on, I'm like, you can't really do anything about the fact that bikinis are G-rated, technically speaking, even though they're not, right? They're not. Certainly not. 100 years ago, you'd probably get arrested for wearing one. Maybe not 100 years ago, maybe 110 years ago. I'm not sure exactly how the roaring 20s were, but I know it was a more permissive time. That actually the things you see in the post-war 50s, like that kind of buttoned-down America that was a response actually to a lot of the excess in the 20s, when a lot of when people were kind of running wild. Then they had the Great Depression. That kind of serious things up a bit. I create new heavens and a new earth, for the former shall not be remembered nor come to mind. Anyways, but God having hid from his eyes, it's a reference in some ways to our own sin. By the blood of Christ. The former troubles, God offers this mercifully before even the blood of Christ was shed. But ultimately, because there are so many troubles, so many sins, he requires there be some offering for it, something in exchange. And in exchange, he offered himself in the person of his Son. God himself in the person of the Son. And that's how those things, ultimately, when judgment is passed and all the judgment is sorted out and all humanity has been reckoned with, then comes the new heavens and the new earth. Now, I guess the millennium is also a renewed time. There is a restoration spoken of. Now, like I said, maybe that millennium should be compressed into the new heavens and the new earth, and it should just be that 1,000 years is just symbolic of age abiding, eternal. But 1,000 is kind of not very much, when you think about it. Consider Christ has been gone for nearly 2,000 years. 1,000 years is a lot of time for a man, but according to the history of the world, not much at all. Depending on how you look at it. Certainly when it comes to God, He is from everlasting. So, 1,000 years is as a day, and a day as 1,000 years, which is an interesting thing. Because, like, you could say, well, time passes quickly. Like 1,000 years goes by like a day to God. But also a day like 1,000 years. Meaning within that time frame of a day, God has all the time. Like to him, that time, it stretches out just like 1,000 years does to a human. Like there's an infinite amount of space in there. So that, well, I'm not going to say precisely 1,000 times the space, because it's just a metaphor that's saying there's sort of like he has this within the same time frame, there's available to God so much more time. We never have enough time. You imagine if I could, while everyone else is experiencing 5 minutes, if I could experience 5 hours, so that I would get 5 hours worth of things done while everyone else got 5 minutes done. Then you can see how amazing that can be. What if while you're doing a minute, I'm doing 1,000 minutes? I have with it, and the ability in that to output. Well, that's why it's weird. I'm like, I moved the microphone over. I'm like, why does it sound so weird? So, but be glad and rejoice forever in that which I create. For behold, I create Jerusalem a rejoicing and her people a joy. And like I say, I do think that ultimate realization of the new heavens and the new earth is post-millennial. But some of what is promised in that, just as when Christ, as I compared, when he read from the book of Isaiah and he closed the book right before it said the day of vengeance. God does intend a day of vengeance, but Christ was not there to do it. And also God does intend to create a new heavens and the new earth, but there will also be a time of an earthly kingdom. It'll be a time of restoration. It will be a time in which I think people will still exist in the world who are flesh and blood, but not us. And that could be wrong. I'm not dogmatic about it. I do feel strongly that it's a better position than amillennialism, in my opinion. But, and I continue teaching the Bible from a premillennial perspective. So, but not without, I'm not going to not acknowledge there are issues with it. And everyone should acknowledge, in my opinion, that it's not just so simple to say, oh, we'll just unify it all. It's like, when you read in Revelation, the rest of the dead lived not again till the 1,000 years were finished. This is the first resurrection. I do feel like that's revelatory. We never heard of first and second resurrections before the book of Revelation, or of any 1,000 year between, the coming of Christ and then the releasing of Satan from out of some pit. And also, if Satan's supposed to be bound for 1,000 years, they say the 1,000 years is symbolic of some period, I believe, that has already happened then. If you're amillennial, we live and reign with Christ now. But the problem I have with that is we do not see him reigning. He must reign. It says in the scriptures, he must reign. Wilt thou at this time restore the kingdom to Israel? It is not for you to... He didn't say, oh, no, the king... We reign, dude. I rose. We're reigning now. I'm ascending into heaven. I'm just going to reign up there. You're going to reign down here. It's going to be wonderful. No such thing happened. It is not for you to know the time or the seasons. It's coming. It's still coming. The kingdom is coming, in the which the king, Christ, will set himself up on his throne, on the throne of David, ruling over the children of Israel, and also his elect serving him. Apparently in resurrected body. It's going to be a strong element of the earth ruled by supernatural people. It's going to be like, and I've often wondered if Satan, when he comes in the Antichrist, in form of Antichrist, if it's not going to be like an alien invasion. Just like this alien technology that is always moving around, and it's these very small things, and I don't know. I have my suspicions, but, what my suspicions aren't worth anything until we see it. So, The new heavens, the new earth, and from my perspective, are here promised. Look at, I'm going to create a new heaven and a new earth. The former shall not be remembered. That is the ultimate thing, is God is going to put the past behind us, just as he does for his servants. He's going to create Jerusalem a rejoicing and her people a joy. Now there's the heavenly Jerusalem. But there's also, like, that comes down from God out of heaven, prepared as a bride adorned for her husband. When it's shown to him, it's not clear if that's pre or post millennial. I think I always took that heavenly Jerusalem. I don't know. There is, well, I know that it's post millennial. I believe it's post millennial when you look at in the section in chapter 21 for sure, when it describes the city there. Yeah, because the angel comes after these things, and it feels like it's a post, because they say, they all have their part in the lake which burneth with fire and brimstone. And the angel says, come on, let me show you something. And he just went from the lake. So it does feel like you're going on. And that's how I've always felt in chapter 21 there, where after it talks about they that have the part in the lake with the burn with fire and brimstone. There comes to him one of the seven angels that had the seven... Came to me one of the seven angels which had the seven vials full of the seven last plagues, and talked with me, saying, come hither, I will show you the bride, the Lamb's wife. And he carried me away in the spirit into the wilderness, to a great and high mountain, and showed me. See, he carried me away in the spirit. That's why I have trouble reciting the words, because I have so many he carried me away in the spirit into the wilderness. No, wait. He carried me away in the spirit into a mountain. And I was thinking, like, to a city or wherever. But God in the spirit has carried men away into a few locations. But in that case, to a great and high mountain, and he shows him that great city, the holy Jerusalem, descending out of heaven from God, having the glory of God. And her light was like unto a stone, most precious, even like a jasper stone, clear as crystal, and had a wall great and high. That all seems to be coming after the fact. But it's not actually clearly so. It comes textually after the fact. And so it seems reasonable to assume that it is the next thing we go on to, but it's not always so in Revelation. So I'm a bit reluctant to say for certain. Because I know everyone loves those that speak with authority, like Jesus, but that requires one to be Christ, or to have a sure word from God in the Spirit prophetically. But sometimes God just He expects us to take the gifts He's given us and use them and profit with them, and we must use them to the limits, as much as they're worth. We got to try to use them, and the Lord will let us do so and find out that way also. Everything doesn't have to come by revelation. We can come by continuing to study. By studying, God reveals things to me all the time. That, in that idiomatic sense. I will rejoice in Jerusalem and enjoy my people. Sorry, I didn't hit the mute button. And the voice of weeping shall be no more heard in her, nor the voice of crying. This reminds me of... For some reason, this little section actually reminds me of like the inverse of what it says in Revelation of the great whore in chapter 18, right? When she's, all the things that shall be no more heard at all in thee. There are all these things listed, and it has a similar feeling, except it's the opposite. Okay. If I want to do this, I have to do it the unlazy way, which is this way. Like it says, the voice of harpers and musicians and of pipers and of trumpeters shall be heard no more at all in thee, and no craftsman whatsoever crafty be shall be found any more in thee. The sound of the millstone shall be heard no more at all in thee. The light of the candle shall shine no more at all in thee. The voice of the bridegroom and of the bride shall be no more heard at all in thee. For thy merchants were the great men of the earth, for by thy sorceries were all nations deceived. It'll be no more, no more, no more, no more. But here it's like there'll be the voice of weeping no more heard, the voice of crying no more heard, no more an infant, of days, meaning of just infant mortality. No more infant mortality. No more, where infants die, like that happens. It still happens today. Infants die, I almost lost my first one. My first child almost died. Then 2 weeks. I'm a 23-year-old, 23-year-old. I turned 24 that year. But 23-year-old, young father sprinting into a doctor's office with a cold, limp baby. It was a very stressful, it was a very traumatic experience, the whole thing. Both times, because 6 months later, we had another ordeal. It changed me significantly, actually, a lot. The degree to which that affected me, it's hard for me to quantify, but a lot. Changed me a lot. Made me a lot more careful, even than I want to be. I find myself annoyed with my the care sometimes I take because of that. But it's a terrible thing to lose a child. When we were blessed, our son recovered. We were praying that he would recover. Nor an old man that hath not filled his days. For the child shall die 100 years old, but the sinner being 100 years old shall be accursed. And this is often taken to mean like the idea that, if a man dies at 100, it would be said that he was but a child, He was so young. So a man who dies at 100 would be said to be a child. He died young if he died at 100. But a sinner, but again, now here's an interesting thing. Oh, yeah, now here's some of my thoughts on this, okay? Like getting really nitty-gritty about the millennium. If this is some sort of prescriptive thing. The idea is, if there are children born in the millennium, because like I said, God isn't killing everybody. Like in Matthew 25, it seems like the sheep and the goats thing means it's all judged and you'd only have the redeemed after Christ comes. But what I'm saying is, no, it's not like that. That if there is a millennium, like as deeply, what I would call like a hard millennium, like in my view, then when Christ comes and establishes his reign, we would all reign with him, and we would reign over a planet of people who were not killed. And Christ isn't going to come kill everybody, nor condemn everybody. And I think that perhaps the mark of the beast may not be as universal as we suppose, any more than mask wearing and vaccines are universal. It's hard to rule the whole planet, every last corner. Though, I do expect Satan to make a go at it, and probably pretty successfully. So it's a little bit, there's a little bit of like mark of the beast stuff. No man who takes the mark can be blah, 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 blah. But I'll tell you what, those who in spite of having the mark, who feed those of Christ's servants when they're hungry, who clothe them when they're naked, who visit them in prison, perhaps for them there is a form of mercy that does not involve eternal life, but allows them to continue to live and to bring about a new generation. And so it says in the millennium that people will live long lives. A child shall die 100 years old, right? But the sinner being 100 years old shall be accursed. I think that means he will fall prey to the curse as it has been in the world. He will die at 100. Meaning like we do now, his life will not go. The people who are left over, the sinners of this world who live through the tribulation and come out on the other side, will not have an extended life. That's what I'm saying. They will not have their lives extended They will live out a natural lifespan. But their children that are born into that world will live out an unnaturally long lifespan, as the days of a tree, as it says. So they will have unnaturally long lifespans who are born into it, but not those who come in, the sinners. At least that's an interpretation for what it's worth, and don't think it's worth too much. It's not, because I'm very hesitant about that millennial stuff. I mean, I'm trying to sort. What I look at it is I've studied this for a long time, and I try to sort it out, and it's complicated, and you can't. And so when it's so complicated, and it's not essential. I mean, it's not an essential item of faith that you have to have faith in my view of the millennium in order to be saved. That's not at all. Or in order for, I mean, it's not like even like the rapture where you could say like, well, there's some real hazard to believing in that. Because in some ways, it leaves you vulnerable to deception. And especially if you're not attentive to other matters of faith. If it is part of a pattern of you not giving heed to the scriptures, of just a pattern of following after whatever men say, then it can be something that we have to answer for as sin. Well, like I said, I don't personally think that a person who's a true believer who happens to believe in the rapture is going to just flip over and worship Satan as the Antichrist just because there's no rapture. I think that the Spirit, that it can compensate for our little errors like that, okay? But that is something you could claim but the millennium is all stuff that happens, that we claim happens after Jesus comes, at least in my view. If it's already going on, I don't know what we have to do about it. If there is no future millennium, if this is all the we reign with Christ that there's going to be until the eternal state, the new heavens and the new earth, if until then this is it, then what's there to do except live out our Christian lives as we find written in the scriptures? But there is no millennial doctrine really to worry about. You just kind of dismiss it all as being that's the new heavens and the new earth. And once again, it gets kicked to a time after Christ returns and is not that important. We all are looking to the coming of the Lord Jesus. That's what's next. That's the big prophetic event for the followers of Christ. There is an antichrist. There is all these signs and stuff. But what I mean is the next good thing is Christ comes and we are raised from the dead. All right. So we don't. So now if the post millennial view is true, though, there is. Well, see, I live my Christianity in harmony with that view, which is that we should make the world better and better until Christ returns, and that we would usher in the millennium ourselves, and that Christ would return after we had reigned for 1,000 years. I don't think that's right. I don't think that's going to work without Christ, because I don't think Christian rule is going to be any better than non-Christian rule. Because one, we have ruled, not as Christians, but Christians have been in positions of power. And as such, are subject to the same corrupting influences as anyone else. Now, I don't recommend any leader be chosen who does not fear God. It's dangerous. Hold on, I got to mute this and blow my nose. Okay, thanks for waiting. All right. So, anyways, so they shall build houses and inhabit them. Mute 1 second. They shall plant vineyards and eat the fruit of them. And again, notice, it's not they shall lounge about on couches and have sex with 49 virgins or whatever, and eat grapes, have grapes peeled for them and popped in their little decadent mouths as they grow fatter and no, you never get fat. You can eat as many pastries, shove your mouth, pastries, and your teeth will never rot out of your mouth, and you'll never get fat, and you can have all the sex you want. That's how people portray heaven. Muslims and Christians. Christians apparently think food is okay to just indulge in, and Muslims apparently think carnal delight is perfectly okay to indulge in forever and ever. Okay? But according to The biblical view is they shall build houses, they shall plant, they'll work, because human beings like to do productive things. Heaven is going to be a place of productivity, a place of doing things. God's kingdom is not a place of lounging, a place of boredom and monotony. It is a place of joy and rejoicing. Yes, but in doing, God himself is a workman. He likes to work. He rested after 6 days, the seventh day, He worked for a while before he decided he needed to rest 6 days. You work yourself tired for six days in a row, and you'll see the seventh, you probably need a seventh day. It's hard to go hard at it day after day. And I mean hard at it. But the point is, they're going to work, but they're going to enjoy the fruit of their labor. They will not have other people take it. Like Jesus said, lay up for yourselves treasures in heaven, where neither moth nor rust doth corrupt, where thieves do not break in nor steal. Because up there, because there is no, I said up there, but because in God's kingdom, in that high place, because it's coming to earth, but it is a high place. It isn't up there, like morally and symbolically. It is above us and descends down to us from God, morally and symbolically, and in magnitude as a gift and as a mercy and all that. Also, there's the directionality is top down, but it's going to be here, or a place very much like this. Anyways, a new heaven and a new earth. A new earth can only be a place for humans to dwell, like an earth. And it doesn't have to be a totally new, like a new universe or a new galaxy, but a renewed one, as Arnold Murray used to say, and I don't disagree with that, because the word new can mean refreshed in that sense. But it doesn't matter either way, and I don't think it's a point to be dogmatic about, because, again, nothing we say, there's no prizes being given out by, oh, you were right, for that. It's good to be right about things like, oh, you were right, you shouldn't have committed adultery. Let me give you a hand, It's good, you made the right decision there. Good job. That's good. You do get prizes. Well, not for being, you don't get prizes necessarily, but I'll applaud you for getting that right. But getting, what color is God's hair or whatever, well, it's white as snow actually. But anyways, like getting things like that, I don't know how that, the point is we can't give you a hand until we get there. And so it's no use right now. It's fun to speak about it. We are all curious to learn about it, right? Everyone likes hearing about the millennium and wondering about what it's going to be like, or God's kingdom, or the new heavens and the new earth, because, the eye hath not seen, the ear hath not heard what God has prepared for us. When it says build houses and plant vineyards and all that, I do not necessarily assume that means literally, but it could mean it literally. And certainly I'd look at that literal thing and I say, okay, they're going to labor, but they're going to enjoy the work of their hands. That's the point, is like, it's not just those two specific things, but it's put symbolically for all kinds of activity, productive activity that is good. The building of houses, the planting of fields. These are good things. These are things that are productive and fulfilling to human beings. It is fulfilling. I like to work in my garden and take the produce out of it. It's enjoyable to see it grow and to enjoy the fruit of it. And also a lot of people don't garden, but you go to work. You work and you like to take home your paycheck, right? And you look at it and you say, look, they took out so much. They took it. Someone else ate a bit of it, and then you go to get in your car and you see you've got a notice there. You got to renew your license plate, and somebody takes another bite out of your vineyard. And then you see, then you go to the gas station and you realize that like a third of it is taxes. And they take another bite out of your vineyard. But then again, like I said, I'm at heart, I sympathize deeply with the libertarian position. But I also believe that if we didn't do something about poverty, though the things they did to solve poverty did not solve poverty, but they do prevent. I mean, we never have, when they have homeless people, you don't see a lot of homeless families. Because, well, one, being a married family is like a recipe for not being homeless, actually. It's a good way to not be homeless is to have a husband or a wife and children. Generally, those people in those situations either find a way or get the help. Because mostly what homelessness is an issue of mental illness and drug abuse. That's the primary population that is homeless at this time. The mentally, and there are people who are mentally okay and able to work. Obviously disability can be another cause of homelessness, but people are able to work. But again, if you have disability, they have disability. Some people, I don't know, do you think we shouldn't have it? Sometimes people go on disability and it's kind of sketchy that they belong on it, I guess, right? I don't know. All right. I don't know, because that's a world I've never gotten into, like the disability. I just remember someone who was disabled, and their disability was that they were fat. Quite frankly, or it arose from being fat. And it's interesting how such self-inflicted wounds, we would take care of people. And, I'm not against taking care of people, but there's a lot of incentives driving people towards just allowing themselves to be taken care of. And though it is more fulfilling for people to work and labor and to produce things, even though that is more fulfilling for people often, because of the ease and the seductiveness of the leisure, that they will take that. That's what they dream of a heaven where they just lay around because they don't want to work. But if you go and work, you find it very fulfilling. People who try it inevitably like it. And it doesn't have to be, when I say go to work, I don't mean necessarily but to work at something. Like I said, it doesn't have to be building houses and planting vineyards. And I'm talking about I'm not talking about, yes, now, of course, we need to work, as Paul said, we need to work with our hands to feed I would call it an obsession because, I do believe, I have softened my talk about free will. Because I understand it better having long meditated on the subject. Because the Bible explicitly teaches predestination. We know God is all-knowing. And also that he created the world knowing what... So, there's a destiny is fixed. Are our choices therefore meaningless? No, because it's such a complicated system that only God could see the end from the beginning. And for us, in it, we are just doing what is in our nature to do. But it is most certainly us and meaningful. Because God didn't make us do things. He made people who would do things. And just because he knows so certainly, it's really just God's mercy that he made the world the way he did so that we could exist in it. You know what I mean? So that I could exist. So that you could exist. If the world was different, we wouldn't be here. Somebody goes back and goes back in time, kills Hitler. Next thing you know, he killed us too. And all the billions of people who are alive today. Because a different world unfolds. You consider all the people that got moved around and killed in World War II. If you actually stopped the war, honestly, kill Hitler, it may not be enough. That war was probably coming anyways. But without him, would it have been as horrific? Quite possibly, because honestly, Hitler was just going along with the ideas of his age, which were socialism. Hitler was a socialist, the National Socialist, and he definitely went about establishing socialist policies of the government interfering with business, and not just interfering like with regulation, which can be good if properly done, if done for the good of the people, as opposed to regulatory capture where it's done for the good of giant corporations. And that's what it becomes. The government becomes the protector of the corporations and of the moneyed interests like we have today. We have a kind of an oligarchy. Though we have these democratic institutions and we have a republic, technically, like our control of it is being wrested somewhat from us. And we're beginning to see it. I mean, just the fact that this doctor, this bureaucrat, can sit up there and dictate whether people have the right to assemble. Say, well, Congress can make no law, but the bureaucracy can just dictate whatever the F it wants. I mean, really? It's a dictatorship of a doctor. And it pisses me off because I know how to tell doctors to go to hell. I know how to tell doctors to buzz off. And I'm not afraid to do it. I'm itching to do it. Because though I believe in medicine and all that, I know that you have to watch out for yourself because doctors are just people. I knew guys at school who were studying to be doctors. Not all, you know what I mean? It's like competent, but they're not necessarily, you look out for your interest. You know, they're not, they're like car mechanics. You have to think about them that way. You know, I'm pretty picky about who works on my car. I'm even more picky about who works on me. Or I ought to be, somewhat, you know. I say that because I'm not that picky about it. But what I'm saying is I'm not, if I don't like somebody, if I think they're not doing things in the interest of me or my loved ones, I know how to fire that doctor. Because you can immediately tell them you're not caring for me anymore. I don't understand. You can withdraw consent. You can sign all the consent forms you want. You can withdraw that at any time. Consent to treat, sure, yes, sir, I sign it. Treat me. You know, but if I start, no, you're fired. You're not, I refuse treatment. Up to this point, you were treating me, but now you're not. And this Fauci's never treated anybody as far as I know. He's a bureaucrat. He just shuffles money around. He's a doctor, so he kind of knows about doctoring and medicine and medical jargon and research, and he oversees that crap, but he doesn't have anything no field science work or anything since whenever. I mean, he's been in government for like 40 years. He's the highest paid government official with his own picture painted behind him. Whatever. I hate that thing eating up so much of my life. Fire them. Right? We can fire them. So they shall not labor in vain nor bring forth for trouble. Because that was the experience of Israel. They labored, and others ate. But it was punishment for their sins. It was punishment for their... But the thing is, not everyone who suffered those things was guilty of those things. The righteous often suffer with the wicked. This country, like in our country now, it doesn't matter what I think. It's like I got to suffer with everybody else. The stupidity of the leaders. Doesn't matter. We think someone sensible is going to come along. No one besides you, buddy. Until we all say, enough is enough. Stop playing along. You can start by taking off the mask. Just because it's an outward symbol of your obedience. I know some places, if you have to go to the doctor's office, put your mask on. They won't let you in without it. They'll call the police. My hospital will call the police. That's just the way they are operating. And they're a hospital, okay, whatever. If I have to wear it to the doctor, I'm willing to make that concession. That's about it. I've told you before, I'm willing to play around the edges of all that, but in general, you know what I mean? Like, do what you have to do to get by, but whenever it's easy, because like I tell people, I do it because it's easy for me. I don't live in a liberal area where I'm going to have, I was yelled at. It's a blue state, and I was yelled at, but I don't have, the support has fallen. When I go around in public, I'm not the only one not wearing a mask anymore. But I'm still, it's somewhat annoying seeing any of them. And here's the thing, if you want to help end it, that's one thing you can do outwardly, is let everybody, especially in the cities. And I know that in Australia, I was watching there was an article written to a guy, a documentarian, was talking about things that he experienced in Australia during the lockdown. And they would pull people over. He got pulled over for not having his mask over his nose. I mean, he was driving his car alone, not even in a crowded roadway. And they pulled him over, and his mask was off his nose. And then there was a woman out running. They asked, this police stopped her, asked her what she was doing. She was out for exercise. They said, okay. But then they went back to her house and waited for her there. And when she came back 2 hours later, they fined her for going out too long for her allotted time of exercise. They would love to do that in this country. And many police officers would be delighted to enforce it. You count on that. Not all, some of them, but many of them would, because a lot of people that get into that like to exercise authority. And boy, the more ways, you guys said there are some cops for whom more rules and more chances to write tickets and just F people. They can't wait. That's what makes life worth living, is ruining your day. Not everyone, I'm not saying that of all, but even they know, the cops know that minority, maybe 1 in 5, something like that like being a cop too much and shouldn't be one. And that's a fact. And they may do a good job concealing it to some degree, which is what they ought to do, I guess. I mean, that's the best. If you enjoy your work that much, and it's law enforcement, you should be mindful of it. I mean, I got to give advice, because you have to have a righteous way to walk in something. If you like to enforce rules, you have to not be an oppressor, and you have to mentally consider things. You can't just blindly obey because you like enforcing rules. You have to consider the rightness of it. And, you can't just... An hour and 21 minutes. Wow, I didn't realize how far I went over that. Okay. Look at that. I'm surprised I didn't get a text or something. Do I not have my phone? Anyways. We got to verse 24. And I guess I'll just, we're not going to probably, we'll just pick it up. I'm going to say we're starting at 66. But for those of you who got this far, we're going to, that promise of before they call, I will answer. I mean, it's just saying I'm going to anticipate what they want. Because God already knows, right? That's true. But we know not what we ought to pray for. God already knows. But praying is not necessarily to inform God, but it's for us to draw near to God. Notice the wolf and the lamb lie together. Not the lion and the lamb, as a friend of mine used to be very peeved by. He didn't like that. It annoyed him, but people always said the lion and the lamb. Because it's the wolf and the lamb. The lion shall lie down with the calf, actually, in another place, not here. And so this stuff, again, is it literal? How literal do we take all that? Is the lion really going to eat straw? I don't know. It doesn't seem possible, but maybe the lion will be a changed creature. I mean, it would have to literally be changed to be able to eat straw, because they're not able to. But if they were changed, because here's the thing. I've thought about this. When Christ comes, the creatures that live on earth may change. There may be an evolution event, where we have different kinds of cats now and different kinds of animals. Evolution would not be really what you call it. Like when they talk about, in the old days, they talked about this thing called punctuated equilibrium or something like that, where sudden evolution. Because that's probably a more likely thing, that suddenly there are new creatures appearing. When I say evolution, I got my tongue in my cheek just a little bit. And dust shall be the serpent's meat. Again, fascinating when we're talking about the bottomless pit. A reference to the serpent. On your belly shall you go, and dust shalt thou eat all the days of your life. A fascinating reference that goes right to, in Revelation, that old serpent called the devil and Satan. Because the book of Revelation identifies the serpent as Satan. They shall not hurt nor destroy in all my holy mountain. There will be because he will be chained for 1,000 years. He will not have any power to work evil in the world for 1,000 years, is what it says. And again, if that all be made symbolic, we have to account for it somehow. And it's hard to exactly account and see that it becomes somewhat murky. As it's written, we see through a glass darkly. But when the Lord will appear, all will be made clear. So we will take comfort in that, and know that in that there's a time promised of peace, of reconciliation, of the world being filled with the knowledge of the Lord, and that's what we look forward to. Whether it be millennial or amillennial, it's not so important as that we come to Christ now, and live out the Christian life that He has laid out before us in faith, so that whatever happens when we see Him, we will not be ashamed. Okay, we'll continue with chapter 66 tomorrow. Thanks for joining me in this study. Sorry it went so long. Until then. Let's get up the song.
Shall long enjoy the work of their hands. They shall not labor in vain, nor bring forth for trouble. For they are the seed of the blessed of the Lord, and their offspring with them. And it shall come to pass that before they call, I will answer. While they are yet speaking, I will hear. The wolf and the lamb shall feed together. The lion shall eat straw like an ox, and dust shall be the serpent's meat. They shall not hurt nor destroy in all my